Well, everybody, our guest today has so many accolades that if I were to go through all of them, we'd be all out of time. But suffice to say, this man has done everything within the industry of professional wrestling. This coming July will celebrate his 61st anniversary in the industry. A pleasure to welcome Les Thatcher here to Post Wrestling. Les, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, John, and always a pleasure to talk with you. I'd like to talk to real reporters. It's really cool to do that.
Well, I appreciate that you put me into that category. We're going to talk a lot about Brian Pillman today. But first of all, I know that a couple of months ago, you went through a real big health battle related to COVID. I just wanted a quick update because I know of a lot of our listeners. We talked about it when it happened, when you disclosed this back in January. How are you doing several months after the fact?
I actually was in the gym just 3 hours ago.
Wow.
So yeah. I'm actually it hit me hard. It really did. I had the COVID pneumonia, which is a little more complicated. They tell me. I dropped 14 pounds in 7 days, which is not healthy at any age.
Wow.
But yeah, and it was, a lot of people had told me this, but once actually I was done with the virus, it was the strength coming back was a slow process. Of course, as you get older, that's slow anyway. But this was a little more so than I had been accustomed to. But I'm good now. I've had both the Pfizer vaccinations. So, but I'm still wearing my mask because I'm still a bit paranoid in the gym about those around me.
Yeah, it's going to be such an interesting, year, or I should say plural, years to come of, just seeing, especially at the independent level, what you would probably have a great perspective on this, Les, is that for independent talent that maybe have had a handful, if any, wrestling matches over the last year of once shows get resuming, like how much of an impact that's going to have on them kind of missing a year of improvement, of working with different guys and getting back into that rhythm when they're at such a young age in their development.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're right. It's going to cost them. Something I've always said to people too, I feel that the generation, the 20 years that I wrestled from 1960 to 1980, I feel, or at least in my lifetime, were the golden years for the business. So many great workers to be with, in the ring with, over that period of time. And to me, part of the reasoning for that is we were going 5 to 7 nights a week. And you could do this in your sleep. I used to tease. I said, call me at 3 a.m., wake me up and call a spot and I'll run it. Mm-hmm. It becomes second nature. And these kids today don't have that opportunity. Plus, we had several veterans in every dressing room. I don't care how small the company was. You always, had veterans to critique you or to push you, or if you didn't behave yourself, to make you a little taller if they decided they need to. So, yeah, it's a whole different world. And, it's crazy. I know a lot of the younger kids say, God, we wish we really lived back then. I said, you'd feel a lot different about the business today if you had been in it back then, I'm sure.
Certainly. Yeah, I have no doubt about that. Part of the reason, Brian Pillman is kind of front and center. It's, the Dark Side of the Ring documentary came out last week, and you and Joe Dombrowski have also done commentary and put out the Brian Pillman Memorial Anthology, which, harkens back to what became pillars when it came to major shows of the year from 98 through 2001. And I have to imagine, Les, that these are shows that are constantly brought up to you, and getting to sit back and look back at these shows, so many years removed from them, that had to be quite an experience to go back and relive what I can only imagine were some of the most frantic months in the lead up to these shows for yourself.
Yeah, you must have been there, John, to say frantic, because you're right. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that whole thing, as you mentioned, started in 98. Brian and I both born and raised Cincinnati boys. And, the thing was, after his passing, it was like, maybe we should run a little benefit show, operative word little, to help the family. And that first show was run in Norwood's junior high school gym, which is where Brian grew up and went to school. And we had like 1,300 people in the building. We had to turn away over 400 people.
Wow.
On that first show, and we had no idea. I mean, that it was even going to, grow that big. And first of all, we, obviously, we had Jericho and Benoit on our first main event, and then Sonny and Steve Austin were going to come. And Meltzer had said to me in a conversation, well, if you had somebody from ECW, you'd have the big three. And it really had never crossed my mind. I had not met Paul E. at that time, but I did know Chris Candido and had a good relationship with him. I gave him a call. And so he brokered that for me with Paul. And Al Snow was working ECW time, who lived just an hour and a half up the road from Cincinnati anyway. So we hit the trifecta. And, I'm so proud of those shows and of the people. We had volunteers every year. I finally had a committee of about 9 people. And you're talking about frantic. We started meeting within the second year, and the second, third, and fourth year, 7 months, once a week before the shows, to get everything squared away and put together. And I don't think anyone had a clue how that it would grow. And I know somebody on, I don't know, it was Facebook or Twitter or someplace that they've taken on a mythical proportions. I said it's because they were all special. And I think the great thing about this anthology that we're putting out is if you weren't at a Pillman show, you've never seen any of this footage. I mean, it's fresh for everybody. And Joe has done such a marvelous job of putting the thing together. He went through every disc and VHS tape that I had in my possession, and I'm seeing things that I didn't even know I had. And but I'm really proud of it. And it's over 15 hours of content in 4 discs. It covers all 4 of the shows, 90, 98, 99, 2000, 2001. We're missing a couple, some time on the 99 show, but the other 3 shows are complete. And, of course, the Benoit-Regal match from 2000 has taken on mythical proportions as well, hasn't it?
Yeah. And, part of it is you also introduce like the independent showcase, and there's a singles match on one of them. And I don't know whatever happened to these 2 individuals. Maybe you can provide an update, but there's an independent match between John Cena and Randy Orton, who I guess this was kind of their peak. Les, you never heard from these 2 again.
I've heard of those guys, yeah, somewhere down the line. Well, they were both in OVW at the time, because at the 2001 show, our HWA, my HWA, and OVW were both developmental contracts with WWE. And so, we had the option of guys out of OVW plus the guys on my roster. So that there were, I couldn't even begin to sit here and count how many future stars were on that 2001 show.
No, it's staggering when you see the list. Yeah, of the people that are just before they've even really broken through that are on some of these showcases.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Nigel McGuinness, Steve Corino. One of the best matches in that 2001 was for the Shark Boy, Pepper Parks, who is now Blade, Matt Stryker, my Matt Stryker, the original one, and Chad Collier. Also, but so many of these guys, the great thing for me, John, is during these shows to see how the guys from the major companies, how they treated these. I mean, there was nobody slacking. There was nobody saying, "Oh, I don't want to be, I'd rather not do this or something," and realize that those guys, for us to do this show is either on a Wednesday or Thursday, they gave up their day off, not to be at home or to rest. They came in. And, well, if you get a chance to see this, and I hope you do, every match is a good one. I mean, there's nobody out there phoning it in, right? It's everybody busted their hump. And, of course, I'm going to say this, Benoit, God love him, he and Jericho were the main event for the first one. He and Dean Malenko against Ray, and Conan headline number 2. And of course, number 3 was he and Regal. And when that match was over, I already knew I had the title, and my main event for number 4 was going to be Regal Benoit, the return, Pillman 01. But of course, Chris had the neck surgery, and we couldn't do it. And Regal had called me early that year, and he said, I can only have that match with a couple people, and the other people aren't in this country or even in this hemisphere. And he said it would not do justice to Chris nor to the fans, for me just to work with somebody else. I'll come, do whatever you want me to do. But I agree with him 100%. And he showed up and was one of our VIP guests. But, something special in every one of those shows. And the cool thing, too, is Brian Jr. and I sat here in my living room and kicked around some remembrances from those shows together and showed some posters and stuff that I have here. But then we've got Mark Henry, DDP, Shark Boy, Jericho, Matt Hardy. I'm trying to think of who else we got on this day. I think that Pepper Parks, all the guys who had been on the shows, given their sound bites and their remembrances of the shows, and of Brian himself. And Joe has gone and found commercials that I had made that were aired on Cincinnati television for those shows. And I mean, I tell you the truth, I've seen the cover. I love the cover. I don't have a copy. John, if you can get me one, I would appreciate it.
Well, I'm going to be in the process of ordering one, so maybe we'll have to, both of us will have to go secure copies here, because I definitely, like, I've only got to see over the years, like, the Benoit Regal match that was on the Benoit DVD, and that was, so many years ago. So for a lot of this, it's like you've heard the legend of the Pillman shows, but not actually getting a chance to see them in full.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And well, and the crazy thing, what Joe and I sat here, and now the original show, Shark Boy, without being Shark Boy, was he was my co-host. We did voiceover on the original show because they used that on one of the local stations as a special, because of Brian being a local boy. But Joe and I sat here and did the voiceovers on the other three shows, and he was doing more of the play-by-play, which he is damn good at. And I was more telling stories, the background stuff, and, some of the crazy things that had happened at this show or that show. And, but I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, I've never seen that before. Well, at these shows, they grew in such scope that I was running around. Okay, you needed the concessions, you needed the merchandise, they need you to, here or there. And I got to see some of the matches, but for me to sit down and see this thing edited with all the little teases and specials pieces he's put in there, I'm excited to do that. I want to do it. I'm going to buy a set too, I think.
Now, when you're sitting down with Joe, like, certainly when you talk about the Pillman shows, the match that comes to mind for a lot of people is that match with Regal and Benoit, and not to go down that whole path, but for you sitting down, when it comes to watching Chris Benoit match, can you just separate the two from what happens with him versus this is a wrestling match, bell to bell, I can call and just appreciate the work for what it was?
I absolutely can. I know a couple people feel the way I do about him. I know Jericho is one. I realized what happened. My God, it couldn't have been any more heinous. It was horrible. Nancy, I know Nancy before I met Chris. I knew Nancy from the time she started in the business with Kevin. And Daniel was myself, along with Jericho and Guerrero and a bunch of guys. Nancy called us the honorary uncles for Daniel, right? So I was I felt close to the family, and it was horrible. And if Chris were alive today, I'd say you should be in jail the rest of your life, or executed, or whatever, because that's the truth. But John, he was always respectful, a gentleman, and a pro with me. And there was never a time that we were on the phone together or in person that when we got ready to part, he'd say, well, if we were in person, he'd hug me, kiss me on the cheek. Love you, man. Love you too. Be safe. Or on the phone. So I can't forget that. And as you say, I've been doing this almost 61 years, and damned if that boy wasn't one of the best 10 best workers I've ever seen in those 61 years, then I don't know what I'm talking about. He was a machine. And, yes, I use that match as a training tool. So does Tom Pritchard. So does several other guys, I think. But I tell kids, you need to watch that over and over. That is professional wrestling at its finest. They're not doing any goofiness, no clown act. It's two athletes in competition. And we need more of that today, I think, John, than ever before.
3 of these 4 shows occur while WCW and ECW are still in operation. Is that a credit to Brian Pillman that these companies, once a year, the war ends for one night and talent is available? Or was Les Thatcher just had such an ability that could keep all of these parties happy, which especially during this time period, Les, like WWE doesn't have to play nice with anybody. They could have exerted a lot of influence, and yet we got these shows where these companies were all represented year after year. I think that's a real testament to these shows.
I think it's a lot of what you said. I'd like to believe it's a little bit of all of that. Excuse me. First of all, you're right. Now, ECW, WCW, and WWF/WWE, they paid the airfare for everybody. Out of the show gross, we paid the hotels. We had a hot table with food, chicken breast, rice, baked potatoes, et cetera, salads that were in whatever building we were in that year. That hot table was there for the talent from the time they showed up till the time they left. We had volunteers to take them to the gyms during the day, so forth and so on. Everybody was, it was such a big deal. But yes, that was the only place that you could see the 3 companies under the same roof at the same time. Now, they didn't wrestle one another. But yes, I think in part when Vince realized that Jericho and Benoit were coming from WCW, he couldn't look like a piker, right? So, okay. And then Paul Lee saw that both those guys were on board, and Pillman had been there with them for a period of time. Okay, we better jump on this too. And so that's the way it was. And but I also believe that they trusted that I would, like you're saying, keep everybody as even as I possibly could, and I feel good about that because, some of the
You're a really respected figure, Les. Like, this is not some fly-by-night show that's going on. I mean, you have a lot of trust and equity among a lot of these people that they know that you're running a quality event. This is nothing that, I think they would be proud to be attached to one of your shows. I think it was a credit to you and your team that you guys could pull this off every year.
Thank you, John. I feel good. Excuse me, I've said several times since we started on this project, and now that it's out there and you can see the covers and it's, it's being sold and talked about, I am so proud of what Joe has done in terms of editing, the artist that did the cover, and what little part I had in this part of it here, but what Brian Jr. has done and everybody that has, contributed for this anthology. But over the years, the people that volunteered, the wrestlers that made those 4 shows happen, I couldn't say thank you enough, or couldn't say how much I respect and love them all for what they gave.
Regarding Brian himself, you mentioned like both of you come up in Cincinnati. Is he first on your radar when he's playing with the Bengals? When does he kind of come into your, knowledge?
Well, of course, when he started playing with Cincinnati boy on the Bengals, and that, my mom and dad used to send me newspaper clippings on anything wrestling related or, anything local they think I might be interested in while I was on the road. And so I've heard about this Brian Pillman. Excuse me. Then I saw he was going to try wrestling, and I'm thinking, and of course, there's a multitude of football players that have done it and been successful, as we both know. Ernie Ladd, Wahoo McDaniels, to name a couple, Blackjack Mulligan, to name a third. But I didn't, I'd never met him or anything. Of course, everyone thought, you're both from Cincinnati, you must know Brian Pillman. No, since he's a little bigger than that, we had never met up to that point. But I, of course, had, and then I kind of started following his career and saw. And actually, after I had moved back to Cincinnati, Actually, we met, it was almost by accident. I was training professional bodybuilders and bodybuilders, period, for Perillo Performance, which is a Cincinnati company. John Perillo is a genius at supplementation and diet and all that stuff. And I was working there with him. And actually had worked with a couple, like Road Warrior Animal and his wife were using our supplements, and Steve Austin, and of course John, if one of those guys called, put me on to him. But I had not met Brian at that time. But I might be in the gym on Monday and somebody say, heard Brian Pillman beat the hell out of somebody at such nightclub across the river last Saturday night. So you knew Brian was home for the weekend, right? And so actually he came into to Perillo's with one of the nationally competitive bodybuilders that we worked with, a guy named Donnie Gay. And that's how I first met Brian. Now, when the ankle was fused, he started coming up to HWA and trying and working on that. And watching that was so frustrating for me because I realized, you know, as a young man, they've taken his career basically away from him in terms of what he had done previously. And he's driving himself nuts and he's frustrated, trying different kind of boots and wanting to try to jump off the top rope. And I finally said, Brian, you cannot land on your good leg all the time, or you're going to have two bad legs. It's not going to be one. Mm-hmm. You're going to have to stay off of things like that and build whatever your offense is going to be off of more, you know, stuff on the ground. A lot of your aerial stuff's going to be, and you can see the frustration with him as well, you know. But
and I'm sure that's something you could sympathize with, Les. I mean, you know, someone like me from the outside looking in, it's like, here's Brian. He's got all of these skills that he can utilize in different ways, but he's an athlete and you're wired that way. Like he's 33 when the Humvee wreck occurs. And that's, I mean, you're in the prime of your life. You've been an athlete your whole life. And you've also been told many times that you can't do this, and he'd overcome that. And this was just the latest obstacle. I can't imagine the frustration that he was going through during that period.
Yeah. And, you know, for those who don't know, John, you mentioned everything, realize, excuse me, he had over 40 throat operations. That's the reason his voice was so gravelly. Mm-hmm. But when he walked on to play football at Norwood High School, he wasn't very big at all, but he wanted to be a linebacker. He became one. He also made the Kodak All-American it wasn't Kodak. It was something to do with high school, state, made the state, so forth, so on. He did some of his friends got scholarship offers. He didn't get. Walked on at University of Miami in Ohio, which is not that far from Cincinnati for those who don't know, and became a starter there. A Kodak All-American or honorable mention, whatever it was. But he was the only one of that group that didn't get drafted. Walked on the Bengals. He made it. So he is been overcoming obstacles in his life from the time he was born, basically, you know. I mean, talk about hard work overcomes whatever. He was a poster boy for that in many ways. And I think that's one of the reasons he and Benoit bonded so well, because they both were overachievers. And of course, Chris had been told he was too small, right? And so forth and so on. But yeah, Brian was, he pushed. And you know, and he was sharp. But it started to all go downhill with him, you know, toward the end. And between frustration with his own family and with trying to play both, you know, WWE and WCW, both play them both and get that all done. Well, you saw Kim Wood, right, on the thing. Kim's a great guy.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, Kim, along with Peter Jones is the son of Arthur Jones, who invented Nautilus equipment.
Right. Yes.
Okay. Peter and Kim Wood designed and started Hammer Strength weightlifting equipment. And then they sold out a number of years ago to Life Fitness. But Kim was also the Bengals strength coach for 20 years. And he is a sharp guy anyway. But as you could tell by watching him, he don't mince words. If you ask him his opinion, if you don't want it, you don't ask, right? But that was, he was more the father figure for Brian, actually. And Brian's his sister Linda, what a great lady. I mean, you saw that on the
just
the Vice
seemed
TV
to be like a saint to those children. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And somewhere, and I told Joe after seeing the Vice thing, I thought, oh my God, I have a letter somewhere in my possession that Linda wrote for her mother and herself, thanking me for what I was doing for Brian's memory.
Wow.
and the family and so forth. So yeah, I cherish that. I do. I truly do. And the one thing about that, she mentioned the only two people in the wrestling business that were at the funeral were Vince and Jim. Wrong. Les Thatcher was there, and Bruce Hart.
That's right.
Bruce wrote the eulogy, and you'll hear that eulogy on the anthology. I can't even talk. I got Bruce to. I was so taken by that eulogy that when I started the first show, I was getting ready to print a program, and I called Bruce and I said, "Can you send me a copy of your eulogy for Brian?" And it's printed in every all 4 years program. So I said to Joe, "We need to put that on there." And I suggested having Bruce do it, but sadly, they both. Well, Bruce sounds more like his dad as he gets older, and I realized how many years ago that he did the actual eulogy, and so we were afraid it would maybe take too long or whatever. So Jericho reads the eulogy that Bruce wrote for Brian's funeral.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that, because that was for those that Liam O'Rourke wrote a fantastic book, Crazy Like a Fox, and it describes like that. That scene at the funeral, and Bruce just apparently giving this beautiful eulogy. How tense of a room was that, Les, being there for the funeral for Brian? And it's to me, it was like the most heartbreaking scene in the documentary was the reenactment of the children that they're playing and then have to say bye to daddy, and they're so young at this time, they're not fully understanding that what has actually happened to their father.
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. Yeah, the funeral. It was, there were some light moments. Some of the ball players that he played college ball with showed up, and a couple of them spoke. But yeah, it was a sad trip. Well, the crazy thing after we met, and as I was watching the Dark Side of the Ring, when Austin broke into the basement, I was there.
Yeah, you're on scene for a very famous episode of Raw that I don't know if too many people are aware of that.
Yeah, well, the kids, if you watch that whole sequence, if anybody remembers it, there was two guys outside to fight with Steve trying to stop him. Those were students of mine, and the one got tossed into one of Brian yes. Jr.'s wading pool.
Yes.
And I said, "Are you?" No. He was Steve Austin got me wet. I'm cool, man. I'm good with that. Right. The crazy thing about that, though, John, I don't know if you knew this. I don't know if it's mentioned anywhere, but people in the neighborhood there around Brian's home that were watching Raw that night, they actually thought it was a shoot, and they called the cops. The cops showed up outside.
Wow.
Yeah, they believe Well, I didn't know. I can't say that anybody knew that Brian was going to pull that gun. I was as shocked as surprised. Anyway, when Steve knocked that window in finally in that basement door, that glass flew, my God, 10 feet at least. And I was thinking, man, it's a good thing nobody was standing in front of that damn door. But yeah, I was, and then after Brian's passing, I was, my mom was still alive at the time, and Bruce Pritchard had been hunting for me, and she finally ran me down. She said, "Bruce Pritchard needs to talk to you." And I said, "Okay, I'll call him." He said, "We've got a remote truck headed to Pillman's. I need you to go, if you can get away, to go down and produce a segment. Melanie's going to talk to Vince on the show tonight." And I rolled my eyes to myself, and I thought, really? Okay, but so I went down and produced that segment, and
And what's going through your mind, Les, as someone that has been, doing this for almost 40 years at this point, and this was a segment that it was pretty stunning at the time in 1996 for a company to go in this direction.
Yeah, absolutely. When Bruce said Melanie is going to talk to Vince on the air, and I said, "Would you repeat that to me, please?" Right? Because, going back, John, to when in the 60s and 70s when I wrestled, realize if a wrestler died that had been, let's say I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee currently. Let's say a wrestler that had been famous here died. Our bosses would have told you don't mention that on television. It hurts the show. Right. And of course now virtually anything is, you mention whatever you want now, but yeah, back then and I won't say it was because they were cold and hard, but they just thought that it would, hurt the momentum of their TV show. Right. Which is what I heard. Go ahead.
Sorry, I had been referencing like the whole gun angle, but you were also present producing this is the night after Brian has passed. Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I realized then too, see now, Brian Jr. mentions that Mel and Senior were having problems already. Mm-hmm. And I just sensed, he mentions that she was seeing somebody and that somebody was there, but I had no idea except that I was reading their body language, right? I mean, don't get me wrong, they weren't hugging and kissing or anything, but just his name was Mike and just the way he was around Melanie, I'm thinking there's something here besides just a handshake friendship, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't know at the time. But yeah, that was, it was kind of uncomfortable in that respect. But yeah, it was talking about a groundbreaker. Well, the whole thing of Steve breaking in the basement at Bill's house too. I mean, my God, you're talking about the attitude era, right? The whole business had an attitude then.
Were you surprised at all that Melanie was willing to be part of this documentary that aired last week?
Yeah, I was. I have not seen her in years, and if you read Liam's book, you know why.
Yeah, which
you read the chapter about our shows, right?
Yeah, it's you made the call that after these 4 shows you weren't going ahead with a 5th one, and I thought it was pretty unfair treatment of you. And that appears to be the last interaction you've had with her. That would have been 2002.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, see, I lost a couple of my committee members. One of them worked in the PR department for the Cincinnati Reds, so he was capable of getting press out for us that we couldn't get out ourselves just by using the Reds logo, right? I mean, newspapers and TV, they see that. Okay, well, we're going to plug this. And anyway, and and like I said earlier, all the talent was showing up free on their days off. We've been doing this 4 years, and some of the guys, saying, well, she's remarried. And at the time now she was remarried. I think that was between year 3 and 4. But anyway, and that came, somebody said to me, well, do they need us now? We raised over $120,000 over the 4 years for the Brian Pillman Memorial Foundation. Excuse me. The last 2 years, we also did a second day, actually a day before the Pillman shows. Brian Hildebrand, Mark Curtis had passed away with stomach cancer. And we did Mark Curtis Fantasy Camp in 2000 and 2001, the day before. And kids came, to work. Steamboat, Benoit. Think about this if you were a young kid and a wrestling fan, right? Hey, for a few $100, I can go to Cincinnati and lock up with Ricky Steamboat, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, so-and-so. Would you have spent the money, John? I think so. I would have. Wouldn't you?
I mean, that's unbelievable for the time, for any young performer to be able to learn from that. I mean, that was a benefit in and of itself. Like that just is a testament to all these younger talents that just wanted to get to Cincinnati and just find any way onto those shows or into that building.
as that second show in '99 started, you mentioned the Independent Showcase. We could have run the Independent Showcase from 8 a.m. on the day of the show till 7 p.m. when we put, I mean, I had guys calling me, we'll pay our own way. We won't, I had people actually offering to pay me to be on the show.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how early is that starting in the year? Like are you talking like months out?
We start our committee meetings, between 7 and 8 months out.
Yeah.
Once a week. HWA was kind of dark on Monday, so we had the meetings at the gym on Monday evenings. And, but yeah, it was complicated. And of course it got harder as it got bigger.
Yeah. And I think it goes without saying, like, this again is mentioned in the book, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Les, like you're not making anything off of these shows either. No. This is not some case where this is profitable for you. This is like, you are really one of the unsung heroes when it comes to the story of Brian Pillman. And it was one of the reasons I wanted to have you on here, because these were very significant shows. And as you mentioned, the sum of over $120,000, that's extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said to you earlier, when we started, the idea was, let's run a little show. And the little show grew to be a huge show. And then it was like, can I be on that show? I'll pay you to be on that show. I want to be on that show. And I thought, whoa, and I actually had people get mad at me, John, because I wouldn't book them on the show. Yeah, but I offered to pay. Choices. I said, I can't help it. I'm loaded. I can't, we did the auctions, we between, matches several times in intermissions, we did, we like JR's Stetson, D'Lo's chest protector, woman's gown, Benoit's boots, etc. It's just a bunch of stuff like that. Plus Joe the Belster, the guy that made the spinning belt for Cena. Mm-hmm. Okay. Joe made, he would take the artwork that I had for my t-shirts every year, and he would make a championship belt for each Pillman show. And it was, like Pillman 01 or Pillman 99, whatever it was. And the main plate on that belt was the exact replica of the t-shirt, with the dates and then everybody's name on the side plates. We raffled that off. We had artists donating painted portraits that we could, all sorts of things like that. It was amazing. And the fan base, this wasn't just like from the tri-state area, Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. We had people from Oklahoma, from I mean, seriously, I was blown away by it. That it grew, just, like you wanted it. I mean, no one expected it. And the last year we had right around 2,600 people on 01. And it had grown from initially between 12 and 13 on the first show.
For that first year, was Austin on board pretty early on in the process, or was that something that, once he was involved, suddenly this little show, as you characterized it, suddenly it's that much bigger? Because an appearance by Austin, you're not getting much bigger than that in
at that April point in time, you're right. No, you weren't. And Steve was a big part. Well, I think just the fact that you could go to Norwood Junior High School gym and see Benoit, Austin, Sonny, Jericho, Al Snow, Candido. I'm trying to think if I'm missing anybody. Plus see wrestling and honor, Brian Pillman. And it blew us all away. Steve was emotional that first year. And he told me before, early in the day, he said, now, if I start to lose it a little bit, he said, cover up. I said, oh, I got you. Not a problem. But now, what I wanted to do the second year, because we moved to the Cincinnati Garden, which is a venue that I bought tickets to watch wrestling in, and a venue which I wrestled in 1,000 years ago. But what I wanted there, and we couldn't swing it, was to get Flair and Austin both, because that was the two hottest properties for either company at that point in time. And but we got Steamboat came the second. Well, Ricky came every year after. He came the last 3 years. But Steve couldn't make it the second year, but he sent a check for $10,000. And crazy. Here's a quick side story.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Jericho was coming back the second year, and or we had planned for him to, and he called me and he said, I can't make it. I'm on that Bruise Cruise or whatever it was WCW was having at the time. And he said, and I wanted to come too. He said, because Steamboat's going to be there, and I'm a big mark for Steamboat. And years later, if you remember, they got a chance to wrestle on Raw.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting at home watching. I'm thinking, Chris is blowing. He's out of his mind right now, right? Because he's getting to work with Steamer. But yeah, you know, and that's the thing too. Everybody had so much. I mean, to walk into the locker room, you got guys from three major companies, and then all these independent guys, and everybody is getting along. Everybody's having a good time. Well, you know, and some of the things you'll see once you get this, like in '99, we had a cruiserweight tournament, and Shark Boy won the tournament, and unscheduled. I didn't even know it was going to happen. Foley, Conan, Road Dogg, and Al Snow run out to the ring unscheduled and pick Shark Boy up and start carrying him around on their shoulders. I mean, just crazy, you know, stuff like everybody was really spontaneous and so much of the time, you know. I mean, it was obviously the matches were planned, and because it being a charity show, we want to get the baby faces over for the most part, right? But, you know, that first show, Jericho and Benoit got me offside. What do you want us to do? I said, I want you to do what you do. I want you to go out there and tear the house down. How you do it is on you. I said, I'm not going to tell either one of you how to work. I don't have to. But that was the way, you know, I mean, we'd say, okay, you're going over. But I told guys, it's on, you know, you're here on your own time, right? Just have a hell of a match. And everybody worked so hard, and the matches were good. Well, you'll see. It's, well, Mark Henry makes the comment that he was mentally was kind of burnt out on the business, right? Mm-hmm. And he and I had a little conversation, but then he and Damon, and I said, you know, Mark, a lot of, you know, special things happen at these damn shows. You guys go out there and make something special happen. They did. What do you see? Wait till you see these two big suckers, how the match they have. You will be impressed, John. I promise you. And of course, you know, like I say, every year it was something special. 01, Malenko announced his retirement. 99, Mark Curtis was supposed to referee the main event. Conan and Ray against Benoit and Malenko. He had the stomach cancer. About 3 weeks before the show, Pam, his wife, calls me at the gym, and he had a port. You know, they were feeding him through a port.
Wow.
He was losing weight. She said, we wanted you to know we're taking Brian to the hospital. He's losing too much weight. We're going to have him keep him in there a couple of days. Put some weight back on him. He's in the background yelling to her, you tell Les I'm going to be at that show. I'm going to be there. Wow. Right? And I said, just tell him to get his little scrawny ass to the hospital and get well. Okay? So they came to the show. And I said, I don't want you getting too strenuous out there. I said, I want you to be out there, but not for that main event. I want you to work Terry Taylor and Dr. Tom's match, because they will for sure know how to take care of you, right? And it'll be a slower paced match. Well, he did. And that year I was doing ring announcing. So we go out for the main event, and before any one of the four participants come out, guess who I see coming out of the dressing room? Mark Curtis. He gets up in the ring, and I said, you're not supposed to be out here, but I want to referee this match. I said, you going to be all right? Yeah, I'm going to be all right. And he said, are you going to stay out here and watch the matches? I said, well, sure. He said, well, if I'm not, you can carry me to the back, can't you? I said, yeah, if you want me to. That little sucker, pound for pound, John, one of the toughest guys I've ever met in my life. He wouldn't have missed that for anything in the world. I mean, and realized just a few months later he was gone.
Would this have been the last show he worked?
No, I don't know. Yeah, well, maybe it was the last show he worked, because when they did the thing here in Knoxville, WCW, where they presented him, or Flair presented him with a world title belt.
That's
a
right.
bunch of us showed up here to surprise him, and he wondered, but they didn't let him referee. But it was who was it? Jericho, Benoit, Guerrero, and Malenko, I think, had the tag, and he got to their apron and from the outside and counted 3 on whoever it was, and then we did the Ross Draver, Pennsylvania. Mark Curtis Comes Home, and that was the last time any of us saw him till we went to the funeral.
Yeah, because September is when he passes away, and it was just a tragic story. Just such a popular figure. Like, you will never hear a negative word said about Brian Hildebrand.
No, sir, you sure won't.
Just circling back to the documentary last week, like, I'm sure you've had a chance to watch the whole thing. Like I've said, you could probably commission a series on Brian Pillman, and you could go several seasons deep because he lived such an interesting life, like a lot of highs and lows. Condensing that even in a 2-hour format, how did you think they were able to get the essence of Brian, his influence on a lot of people, and especially the impact on his children as well? Like, how did you feel the production came across?
I thought it was well done. Excuse me. I thought that, the kids were open. I figured they would be, because when I first met Junior in the adult version, after he finished training at Lance Storms, he got back to, he's living with his aunt and just across the river from me in northern Kentucky. And, he called me and he said, Steve Austin and Lance Storm said, I should call you and come sit down with you, be helpful. And I said, sure, come on. And that's the first chance he and I got to talk about it since he'd been an adult. And I think he's dealt with it really well. The girls, I don't know, obviously, or haven't seen in Lord knows since they were small children. But, he's, but one of the things I told him too, I said, listen, your name is going to be a blessing and a curse.
Right.
There's going to be people blowing smoke up your rear end at 100 miles an hour before you even know how to slap your ass with both hands. And let me tell you, you still got to learn. I don't care what your name is. Your name could be Jesus Christ or Brian Pillman. It don't matter. You still got to learn this business. But people are going to want to push you before you're ready to be pushed. And I think that's already happened, and it'll probably happen again. And he's learning. He's learning. He's going to be okay. But it's a burden to carry, I think, John, for him. Everyone talks about his, and I realize too that you sit and tell him, well, your dad was this and your dad was that, and man, and he's sitting there thinking, can I top that? Can I be that good? So he's putting that kind of pressure on himself, I believe, too.
It's always a very difficult balancing act, I find, when you're, the second or a third generation performer and what you're battling. And what we also have, Les, is an era where somebody that, might in another generation isn't appearing on television until many years into their career. Today, it's like you could be wrestling 2-3 years and suddenly a company is scooping you up and you're learning on television as well. Yeah.
And to me, that's one of of course, with the pandemic, and I understand there aren't any house shows, but then, like I tell people, I didn't create the pandemic, so I'm sorry. That's not an excuse. But when I see both companies putting warm bodies on their TVs that aren't ready to be there, and seeing guys who shouldn't be carrying them are carrying them, or girls who shouldn't be carrying them are carrying them. And it's not good for those particular companies or the business, really. And of course, in years gone by, especially now with all these companies are made, they're television production companies as well as wrestling companies. But you get your education in the house show. In other words, let's take Cody Rhodes, for example. If I were the booker for that company, he wouldn't be going 20 minutes with somebody I never heard of before on my television. If he wants to go 20 minutes with that kid and teach him something, it's going to be in a house show or in a gym. But I'm not bringing my stars down to try to bring up a marginal talent. Am I making sense? I hope.
Mm-hmm. No, I understand that completely. I think it's like the whole strategy among with house shows. I think like that's, to me, like the biggest argument is like we're in this era now where everything is centered on television, but you're also sacrificing something if you're limiting or outright removing house shows from your entire strategy.
Absolutely. Yes, you are. You're right. And like I say, to me, your TV is the pinnacle of your brand and how your brand is perceived. And, I'm so tired of people saying everybody's smart because, John, when somebody tells me everybody's smart, I say, obviously you aren't, or you wouldn't be saying that, right? Because the people want to be fooled. I wish we could make a blanket announcement to every friggin' company in the world. Stop it. Forget the bad clown act. And let's get back and get some serious heat, because I think people are ready to do that. Because I think as a former fan or a current fan myself, I'd be happy to forget all the nonsense, the bad things in my life and concentrate on right now I think Roman Reigns is my idea of the best heel in this business currently. And John, is more about his facials and his soft speech. And he makes me want to kick his ass. And the guys who are screaming and not so much. But yeah, I think right now Roman's the hottest heel in the business, bar none. Simply because he's not doing too much.
Yeah, it just seems like he came back and, he just had that sliver of reality that I left to care for my family and I was forgotten about. And boom, you've got the justification, and he just came back with everything dialed in, and it's just hitting on all cylinders.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Well, when I first noticed it was a few weeks back when he was in Adam Pearce's face in the ring, and Uso was, walking back and forth behind Adam. And then I noticed myself, like I'm up on the edge of the couch, and I'm thinking, is he going to hit Adam? Is Uso going to jump at him from behind? And I thought all of a sudden, damn, they've got me. Because, I'm an old beat up bump taker. And if I'm not sold, I'm not buying. It's that simple, right? Those guys drew me in. They made me want to see what they were doing. And they made me believe momentarily. That's the true art of a work, for the young guys that might be listening to you and I, 10,000 dies and 47,000 false finishes is not working. That's just playing, right? There's more to it. And I think with Roman, it's the facials, and it's like he's just about to explode, but he hasn't yet. And will he? And I wasn't sure when they wanted to bring Cesaro back against him, but I think Cesaro is a good enough hand, but it's just the way they've used him for so many years. But I think it's going to work because they're taking a little time. My biggest complaint about the business today is too much bad comedy, which is not funny. Let's face it, there's only one Rock that you and I know about in the world in this business, and he is currently not working for any one of these companies. So funny is not in. 9,000 dives, you can keep those at home if you like. But it's things like Roman's facials for me. Or Cody's last night, Cody got back to doing the right kind of promos. They were when AEW first started, I said Cody's the hottest babyface in the business right now. Not because he's a solid worker. He's not Benoit. He's not Steamboat. But those damn promos draw you in and get you over. But then they forgot that, and they had him go to a Broadway with Orange Julius, and I'm having a heart attack over that, and one thing and another. But you're wasting your top babyface, people, right? You don't go 20 minutes with, what's that guy's name again? He goes 5 minutes with that guy. If he's a top guy, if he's a top heel, or you're building something between them, then they put the time in. There are certain things, John, in this foundation and fundamentals of professional wrestling that I learned 61 years ago are still valid today. I'm so tired of hearing the word evolution. You mean you don't know how to work, so you're going to be a comedian and an acrobat? Okay, cool. But please don't tell me you're a professional wrestler. I'm not buying. And I think that's But I think all this, the bad comedy has increased, goofy gimmicks have increased, and I think all that a lot to do, John, is with the panic within the industry about the pandemic.
Are you seeing, Les, from your vantage point, that, with so many different companies now that do have national television, are you seeing distinctions, or are you seeing a lot of patterns between?
I see a lot of people. You can almost close your eyes and point to one of those shows and say, okay, we'll watch that one, because they're all basically the same. I mean, with varying, differences, obviously. But, and something else about that. I lived through a period of time like this, John. When I was a child, well, when you called earlier this morning, I was reading the Buddy Rogers biography, who was my child.
The Tim Hornbacher book.
Yeah. Have you read it?
It's fantastic. I did read it a little while ago.
I lived it. That was my child. Buddy was my childhood idol. I wanted to be Buddy Rogers. Stop and think. A 10-year-old kid couldn't have picked a better role model, could he? If he wanted to be a wrestler, for God's sakes. But I was so fascinated by Buddy Rogers. And, of course, if you read the book, all the stuff that happened around Columbus happened in Cincinnati, right? Mm-hmm. The TV, I was there for all that. I mean, growing up, I've got a picture. It's on my Facebook page with Buddy when I was 12 years old, taken at Music Hall in Cincinnati. He's in his gear. And I'm 12 years old, and it's, I thought, damn, yeah, he was my childhood. I wanted my mother to bleach my hair when I was 10. Thank God she was smart enough not to do that, because realize at age 10 in 1950 in grade school, I'd have probably been in a damn schoolyard fight every day over that hair. But yeah, I'd jump up and stretch for you like Buddy, but you can't see me, John. Yeah, he's my guy. But yeah, he's an artist. There's another match, O'Connor Rogers from Comiskey Park. I use that as a teaching tool too. That match will never get old. There's two artists at work in that match, and it's just it's amazing. I use a lot of old stuff. Dr. Tom does as well. Several of us do. Because that's the foundations that's missing today. So many. Like if you watched the Benoit Regal thing again from the Pillman show, somebody put it up on Facebook a few days ago, a week or so ago, saying, "Watch, you don't have to start with a headlock and a shoot off." Meaning that they were, and that goes back to my generation as well. If you and I if we're working with we're going to lock up, we may tug a little bit, push apart, feeling one another out, right? Today it's too patterned. That's my problem.
Well,
the guys that I teach from scratch, like Nigel and Shark Boy, Blade, people like that, they can call a match on the fly. And that's the way I teach, because you need to know how to adjust yourself. And you and I sit in the back and lay out a 20-minute match for people we've never seen before in our lives. Or how can we be sure they're going to like it? And if they don't like it, and we're not capable of changing it, we're in trouble.
So for everyone's research material out there, read the Buddy Rogers book, watch Pat O'Connor and Buddy Rogers, which for the time period, Buddy was paid $17,000 for that match. So think about that at that time period of what he made for that. And the Brian Pillman Memorial Shows that are available now at pillmanshow.com, commentary provided by Joe Dombrowski and Les Thatcher. And you can also catch Les on Doc Young's Wrestling Weekly with Victor Sosa. I'm a big fan of this show at WrestlingObserver.com.
Well, thank you, John.
Well, I want to get all the plugs out here because, I mean, it's not just historical. You're up on all the current stuff as well. And it's been great to catch up with you, Les. There's so much going on. And, 61st anniversary this July. That's an incredible statistic.
And you know what? 61 years ago, I never even, would I be alive at age 80? Are you kidding me? I'm surprised myself. I pinch myself every once in a while, John. But the good Lord has blessed me. I'm still healthy, and I'm in the gym 5 days a week.
Wow.
And may I say that I am available to do weekend training camps if you are interested, you can drop me an email, lesthatcher28@gmail.com. I'll be more than happy to send you out the information. I have done camps with Rudy Gonzalez at his school in San Antonio, the Monster Factory. I've done a half dozen up there. I've done, it's now the Nightmare Factory, but it used to be the One Fall Power Factory in Norcross, Georgia. I've done Hawk in New Orleans. I've done all the major school. And, of course, I was a trainer for both WCW and WWEF, whatever. So, yeah, drop me a line. I need to work. My creditors want me to work anyway, John, so I better, hadn't I?
Well, you can certainly take advantage of all of Les Thatcher's knowledge. LesThatcher28@gmail.com is the address where you can contact him. And Les, thanks so much for taking all this time out to speak with us. It was great to catch up with you. I hope we can do this again sometime.
John, I always enjoy hanging out with you. I may not be around if you wait too damn long, you know.
No, we will not wait long. We will definitely do this again. Thanks so much, and I do look forward to checking out the Pillman Anthology. It's really a great project that you and Joe have helped put together and get out there, because these are huge shows for people that, I mean, as I said, it's been like the legend of these Pillman shows, and to have them and all of the extras, the independent showcases, it just looks like a really great purchase if someone is curious to go back.
Do me a favor. You drop me an email and let me know what you think of it, okay?
Absolutely. Will do.
All right. And I look forward to working with you again, John. You be safe. God bless you. And thanks for having me on.